afternoon. You guys look just so enthusiastic to be discussing health policy. I love it. Good vibes. So I'm Helena Bottemiller Evich. I cover food and ag policy at Politico. Yes, Politico covers food and ag policy. We're very proud of that. I'm delighted to be here today with Pat Brown, the founder and CEO of Impossible Foods. For those of you who are not familiar, Impossible Foods is probably best known for the Impossible Burger, which is a plant-based meat alternative that is really designed to mimic the sensory experience of conventional meat. They're actually in every Burger King in the US now. You can get an Impossible Whopper, and I have not had it yet, but it's on my to-do list. I think what's interesting about where you are, Pat, is that you are really at the center of this incredible moment of flux and innovation in the food and ag sector. And we're here to talk about health and sustainability and sort of how this all works together. And I think there's a lot of change. There is a lot of conversation happening around what consumers should and shouldn't eat if they're concerned about sustainability and also their health. But because this is a health summit, I thought I would kick it off with a nutrition question. You have recently taken a little bit of heat on this. I guess some critics have said they don't believe that Impossible Burger is healthier than beef. And isn't that sort of part of the point of trying to encourage consumers to eat an alternative? They point out that there's more sodium and fat in your product than traditional beef. How do you see that interplaying with your mission, trying to get consumers to eat less meat, and the tension on the nutrition side of people trying to eat healthier and also eat more, less processed food?
Okay, well, it's a great question. First, let me just correct two embedded assumptions that were wrong.
Of course. And then I'll fact check you. Is this how it works?
Please do. We don't have more fat than conventional ground beef, so a large majority of the ground beef sold in the US is 80-20. It's 20% fat.
So you have maybe more fat than a lean version, like if you got a 90-10.
Probably less, probably more than a 90-10.
Okay.
But anyway, less than the vast majority of burgers on the market. Less fat and less saturated fat and less calories than the closest cow-based equivalent, which is, again, like 80% of all the ground beef is around 80-20. So,
and 80-20, for those of you who aren't cooks, is the fat percentage.
Yeah.
Fat to lean. Okay, just clear that up. Yeah.
It's a kind of USDA category. And as far as the sodium goes, we have more sodium than a cow burger, but a passion fruit has more sodium than a peach. The question isn't comparative, is where are we relative to a healthy intake of sodium? And you'd have to eat about 6 4-ounce Impossible burgers to hit the limit for sodium intake for someone on a sodium-restricted diet. Okay, so it is not a high sodium product, and if it's not a threat to anyone who is trying to restrict their sodium. That's kind of a misconception, and you can look it up. And
but it does have more sodium than ground beef you buy at the store.
It does, absolutely. And the other thing I would say, but again, celery has more sodium than broccoli. I mean, but who cares? And the question is it going to be, pushing the limits of a healthy sodium intake? And I think that nobody wants to, well, I don't wish they would, but to eat 6 Impossible Burgers a day, but that's what you have to do to get to that point.
Gotcha.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is that when people are cooking ground beef, for example, the average sodium content in a burger served in the US is more than 1% by mass, okay? So you'd actually have to add a lot of sodium to get it up to the sodium content of a burger as served. So that's it for sodium.
So, okay, well, so we touched on nutrition, and I think, your
let me just say one more thing.
Yeah.
We care a ton about health and nutrition. I mean, I was a pediatrician earlier in my life, and we are absolutely committed. We are never going to put a product on the market unless we've done all the diligence to assure ourselves that this product healthier for the consumer than what it replaces.
And you can always iterate, right? Like in a way that it's maybe slower for the beef industry to change the makeup of product. You can.
I'll say.
You can actually change. I think actually the last Impossible Burger I had was probably like 2 or 3 versions ago. Like you're kind of like software, right? You're updating it so you can.
Absolutely.
You can reduce the sodium or the fat. You can dial things and it'll kind of be an evolutionary process.
I mean, actually, that's an extremely important insight. It's an extremely important insight because the thing is that the reason that we have a categorical advantage over the incumbent industry, the main reason is that we can continue to innovate. We're innovating, we're making our product and future products better every single day. And the cow stopped getting better at being delicious 1 million years ago.
They are more efficient, though. You have to give them that.
Not.
They are more efficient than they were 30 years ago in terms of.
Oh yes, but
they're still considered the least efficient meat.
They're incrementally
by a long shot.
More efficient. But just to put it in perspective, producing our product requires less than 1/25th the land area, and that's a really important topic. So ask me about it. Less than 1/9 the greenhouse gas footprint, 1/8 the water footprint, and less than 1/12 the fertilizer input required to produce the same thing from a cow. And we're not satisfied with those numbers, and we're pushing them further. You can't even get close to that with a cow. It's hardwired.
So you mentioned the environmental footprint, and I think that's a good segue into like looking at the bigger picture we have here in Washington. Right now, the federal government is updating the dietary guidelines, which I think we all are somewhat familiar with. You know, they guide school meals and the nutrition facts panel and all these things. But there was a big fight the last round about whether or not we would include sustainability in this conversation about what we recommend people eat. This time around, sustainability is not going to be part of that. And I'm wondering if you think the US will eventually get to a place where we do consider the land, the water, the environmental footprint that you just mentioned in how we give health or dietary recommendations to the country. Like, do you think we will get to that point?
I think.
Because we're not having that conversation.
It's not going to happen anytime soon. If it does happen, it's not because of the visionary people who are making these policies in the government. It'll be because there's grassroots pressure on them to take these issues more seriously. But frankly, the whole reason that Impossible Foods exists, or a big part of it, is that we feel like those guidelines, I mean, I wish they were more thoughtful, but they're almost completely irrelevant. I mean, who even pays any attention to them, really? And, you know, it's not exactly.
Well, the USDA and its tens of billions of dollars of nutrition programs.
No, I understand, yeah. It's not changing how people eat in any significant way. We feel like the only way that we can, you know, the problem we're trying to solve is incredibly urgent, okay? We're on, if you look at the risks of climate change, it's not about getting warmer, it's about as you get warmer, there's a nonlinear increase in the risk of catastrophic events. Like if the West Antarctic glacier were to collapse into the ocean, we'd probably be underwater right now. And the risk of those kinds of catastrophic events, one-time events, is growing non-linearly with climate change. So that's an urgent risk. The other thing that's, I would say, much less recognized, but arguably equally important, and almost entirely due to the U.S. National Food System, is that we're in the advanced stage of a catastrophic collapse in biodiversity. The total number of living wild animals across the board, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and almost certainly flying insects as well, is less than half what it was 40 years ago. So in the past 40 years, we have wiped out half the population of wild animals on planet Earth pretty much across the board. Actually, reduced it by 61%, according to the World Wildlife Fund. Almost entirely due to habitat destruction and degradation by animal agriculture. Just look at those fires in the Amazon. That's the secondhand smoke from your steak, and overfishing in the oceans. Those are the problems we're trying to solve, and it's incredibly urgent. And the only way to solve a problem like this, in anything like that time scale, is a market-based solution.
So you're not waiting for Washington?
I mean, that would be ridiculous. I mean,
I don't know if the Secretary of Agriculture is here.
bless the hearts of anyone who's working on this problem, and I'm not trying to disparage them at all. But when in history has anything on the scale that we need happened by concerted government action? And this is an international problem. So the way we solve
some would argue we do need, to solve climate change, we do need international policy. But I want to talk to you about let's talk about the environmental market-based solution.
Yes.
So are you finding that your consumers, like Burger King, for example, is going gangbusters. I think Burger King recently said it was their best product launch ever. They did an Impossible Burger, which I don't know if everyone would assume that a plant-based burger would do well. So that consumer who's buying it.
It boosted their year-on-year earnings by more than 5%, which is like something that's never happened.
So if you own stock in Burger King, anyway, so if you are looking at who is buying an Impossible Burger, are they making an environmental choice? Like, do you know what their profile is? Are they saying, you know what, I care about land use or the water footprint of beef. Maybe I still eat beef most days of the week, but I'm gonna do the Impossible Whopper one day a week. What is the calculation there? Because to have a market-based solution, it occurs to me you need demand for
Oh, absolutely.
that.
First of all, the way that we think about the demand problem is we're going to go out and proselytize about how this industry is basically good, future generations are going to curse us for having let this industry get so out of control.
You mean the animal agriculture industry?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll give you another statistic. The total biomass of cows living on Earth today is more than 10 times greater than the total biomass of every wild vertebrate living on land, every wild mammal, bird, reptile, and amphibian on land put together weigh less than 1/10 the amount of the cows living on Earth. So, and they're occupying 50% of Earth's land area that used to provide habitat for biodiversity. So it is completely out of control.
But are consumers worried about that, do you think?
No, so that's a good point. And my feeling is that I wish we could get people a little bit more aware, and that awareness is growing, particularly in younger people, which is the demographic that is our best set of customers. But no, the fact is that it's a driver, but it's like the number 3 driver for our customers to choose our product. Number 1 is deliciousness. Seriously. Number 2 is health. Number 3 is environment. But actually, environment used to be like number 10. So
it's moving up.
It's surging. But we can't rely on that for our sales. Our job is to make the most delicious meat on the planet. We're not going to stop until, by consensus, this is the most delicious meat on the planet. And
you're not calling it plant-based meat, I'm noticing. So you're calling it meat.
Well, think of it this way.
It's not an agreed-upon term for your product.
I don't even want to debate it. I feel like you can call it whatever you want, but I think the thing to keep in mind is that when film cameras replace their imaging technology with digital imaging, they still called it a camera, because to the consumer, it did exactly what the consumer wanted from a camera. We have very good data that for hardcore meat consumers across the US and around the world, the way that their meat is made is not part of the value proposition. The fact that it's made from the corpse of an animal is not something that delivers value to meat consumers. In fact, it's the opposite, that people love their meat in spite of the way it's made. What they value is deliciousness, the nutritional value, convenience, affordability, which they love in spite of the way it's made. So if you can deliver those and make it from plants, this is why, the words made from plants are bigger than the, word burger on our thing, because we know that once people taste it, that is all upside to them.
Because they're surprised that it tastes more like meat than they were expecting, you think?
That it tastes delicious. And So they can call it what they want, but the basic point is, from the value delivered to consumers' standpoint, this delivers everything they value from meat and gets rid of something that they actually assign a negative value to, which is all the problems associated with making it from the corpse of an animal.
So why do you think it is that per capita meat consumption really hasn't gone down in the US? I think it's ticked slightly upward over time.
Yeah.
Even though we have, I think, seen, we've all seen the headlines about the carbon footprint of beef and comparing it to SUVs and all of this stuff.
Sure.
Now you see it increasingly compared to transatlantic flights, which I think actually your transatlantic flight is worse than an entire year of meat eating. But anyway,
I'll give you a statistic which I can back up.
Yeah.
If you eat a typical American diet, and because of the high amount of meat in that diet, it's actually more efficient from a greenhouse gas standpoint to fly 3 miles than to walk 3 miles. In other words, wherever you're traveling, it's more greenhouse gas intensive for an American to walk than to fly in an airliner.
Because of
your
the calories?
diet, because of the environmental impact of the meat in your diet, on a per calorie basis, the calories burned.
I'm not in a position to fact check that, but I'm going to look
fact
it up.
check it.
That's
fact check
really interesting. I'm not sure, folks, but okay. So, but my point is, I think consumers have gotten the message that meat takes more resources, and yet we are still consuming it. And we're still, per capita dairy consumption is up, per capita meat consumption is up. So do you think that it's really the young consumers that are going to shift that debate? Is that mostly who's going into a Burger King to buy an Impossible Whopper?
Well, I think that, and it's not just about food.
Because really, transatlantic flights have a large carbon footprint, guys.
Oh,
that is true.
Oh,
yeah.
no, I'm not denying that, but I think that people, that's like, oh, of course, look at the contrails. Yeah, it's lots of greenhouse gases. What they don't realize is actually, on a global scale, it's a rounding error compared to animal agriculture.
Well, that's because not everyone can afford to take transatlantic flights.
Okay, well, let's not get in a debate about that. But anyway, you were talking about something important, which is that, first of all, it is true that younger people are a lot more interested in trying to protect the global environment than my generation. And that's a very encouraging sign. And they're making choices as consumers with that in mind and so forth. But even that aside, they're eating a lot of meat. So the way to solve this problem, I think, and this is kind of like the core reason why I founded Impossible Foods, which was, if you'd asked me 15 years ago, which is about the last thing I would ever contemplate doing, is
here you are.
Yes, because I realized that the greatest threat to the global environment, by far, is the catastrophic impact of animals as food technology. And I would say at this point, most environmental scientists would endorse that. In fact, Steve Chu, who was a former Secretary of Agriculture and was working on fossil...
Secretary of Energy, you mean.
Secretary of Energy.
I can fact check you
Yes,
on that.
Was all about renewable fuels. And several months ago, he said, oops, actually, animal agriculture is a bigger problem than fossil fuels from a greenhouse gas standpoint.
I did not see that he said
that.
Because their fossil fuel emissions are still much greater globally than animal agriculture emissions by a long shot.
Not by a long shot. In fact, here's an interesting statistic. You can look this one up too. If you look at the total greenhouse gas footprint of global animal agriculture, it exceeds by more than a factor of 2 the greenhouse gas emissions from Exxon, Shell, BP, and Chevron combined.
So that might be true for those specific countries, but overall,
no, not countries.
Or companies, sorry.
Yeah.
But the overall greenhouse gas emissions from transportation industry, all of the, all the other ways we emit, those are still dwarfing animal agriculture. Animal agriculture is a significant contributor, but it is not larger than
Okay, so let me talk about something else.
This is sometimes thrown around.
Yes, but there's a good reason for that, which is that something that doesn't get contemplated, which I think is, people should think about this because it's an incredibly promising potential interim solution to climate change, which is that the animal agriculture industry occupies about 50% of Earth's land area. In the US, according to the USDA, it occupies 48% of the continental US. Huge land footprint. The best carbon capture technology ever developed is photosynthesis. It was perfected over billions of years of evolution. And what it requires is sunlight, water, and land, basically. If you could, and I can also give you the numbers on this, but if you could magically make that practice stop on the 50% of land area that it occupies and do nothing else, the recovery of biomass on that land, because it's vastly lower than it was before it started getting used for grazing and feed crops, the recovery of biomass on that land would actually immediately start not just reducing the rate of growth, but lowering atmospheric CO2 concentrations, because photosynthesis would outpace fossil fuel emissions. So there's an opportunity. I've not seen that study,
but you're going to have to send it to me. Yeah, because
send me an email, because I will send it to you.
Thinking about these on the macro scale is really, I think, what's hard for consumers, right? Because we're trying to make these day-to-day decisions, and we're not thinking like, oh, if I swap this one thing out, am I contributing to carbon capture? I mean, it's just not the calculation.
That's why we focus. That's why, Impossible Foods does not focus on educating consumers about these issues and getting them to care about the environment. All we focus on is deliciousness, because basically we know that you don't solve this problem by trying to persuade people to reduce their carbon footprint. There's nothing wrong with that, but we need to solve that. Our mission is to completely replace that technology by 2035. That's fast.
Do you really think that's possible? So you're talking about replacing.
I wouldn't be spending my life on it.
The entire, by 2035.
Here's the great thing about it. Market-based solutions to replacing technology, an inferior technology, historically have happened many times on a scale of a couple of decades, okay? So this is why we're taking this approach. And really what it comes down to, again, is, unless we deliver the deliciousness that the specific deliciousness that meat lovers crave, and better nutrition and affordability and all that sort of stuff, we fail in our mission. But I'm completely confident that that's doable from a scientific standpoint. And if we do outperform in deliciousness, nutritional value, and affordability, it's a no-brainer. We win that one. And so that's how we're approaching this.
Although I think there is a big X factor, though, in that how willing are consumers to make that switch, even if it does taste very similar. I mean, time will tell.
But we have done, as you can imagine, a ton of research on this. And I can say that once they've tasted our product, we've done this with over 1,000 random meat consumers in the US, the majority of them say they would actually prefer it if it was available to the cow-based product. So I think that the thing is,
most of them are still eating meat and also your product. It's not like they're switching completely over.
Well, I hope tell them to.
Your goal is to get them to.
Don't switch just yet, because we're having trouble keeping up with the demand, seriously.
Okay.
But
yeah, that has been an issue. So but quickly, I want to talk about, what do you have to say to, I mean, I cover agriculture in rural America, and there is a lot of angst about this idea that, Silicon Valley is coming up with these concepts that are supposed to replace the livelihoods or eliminate the way of life of cattle ranchers across this country. What do you have to say to those folks who think this is offensive, the idea that you would replace industry?
This is America, and I don't think it's a crime to try to create a better product that does a better job of pleasing consumers and compete in the marketplace and let the best product win. So, and when I, replace an incandescent bulb with an LED bulb, it's not because I hate coal miners. I don't hate coal miners. A large fraction of the people in our company, a very significant fraction, come from families that are still active in animal farming and so forth. We don't mean them any harm, but that is the most destructive industry on earth. And So we're trying to do a market-based solution to this. Another thing to keep in mind is we will be just as dependent on farmers as we are today because all our raw materials come from the farm. If the market for beef for meat is the same as it is today, and ultimately it's all produced by products that come from the farm, the potential for that value chain to reward farmers the same as it does today exists. I don't want to be glib about it because it's not going to be ranchers if they're continuing ranching. On the other hand, there's other potential things that they can do with that land.
So you're just saying basically it's the free market, this is how it works, like let's
That's
compete.
it.
And
Yes.
do you think it
And it's better for the world by far. It's believe me, your grandchildren will be thanking you for having done this.
Okay, last thing, how important is it that you get to use terms like meat and burgers? This is one of the policy issues that...
It's actually not that important because I feel like we could put our product on the shelf and just say...
And people would kind of know.
Just look at it. What is this?
Because it looks similar to ground.
Yeah, it looks the same. But I think that but we say it's made from plants. So again, made from plants is the biggest text on this thing. No consumer who knows how to read could possibly be confused about what this product is.
So it sounds like you're less interested in caring about the policy fight over labeling and all this other stuff, and you're just focused on getting it into the hands of more people, and that's the path forward.
That's overwhelmingly what we care about, is that whatever gets thrown our way, we'll deal with it. I think that there's no credible argument for this labeling issue because consumers are not confused.
Well, these consumers won't be confused because they've heard from you, so they know what's going on.
Well, if they can read, they can see made from plants on the label.
And on that note...
But at any rate, and I should say that is, we wouldn't take that off even if people asked it to, because made from plants is added value to consumers, and we have tons of data here. Can I ask the audience a quick question? How many of you are meat eaters? Don't be shy. All of you, I'm sure.
All of you.
And how many of you love the fact that meat is delicious, it's a good source of protein and iron, and convenient, affordable, familiar, and so forth? And how many of you love the fact that it's produced from the corpse of an animal?
Okay, a few people.
No,
and on that note,
but the point
really,
is,
they're telling us we're out of time. But that was very interesting. We should get the results. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Okay.
I guess you can go to Burger King now and decide for
Yes,
yourself.
You do. Go to Founding Farmers.
Yeah, thank you.